Good evening. Again, as I've been starting out lately, thank you very much for all the support. I want to make sure that you know that we're all have a lot of gratitude for the help we've gotten to keep everything running, keep the lights on, as they say, and also ask that you continue to help us. We'll be forthcoming at some point in the not too distant future with more descriptions of projects about what we're going to be doing, not only in the monastery, in this whole complex of buildings, but also in the immediate community. The high school that's 3 blocks away, Garuda House that is recently purchased, and we're in the middle of trying to renovate. So we'll include you, let you know what's happening, and you can see if you can continue to help us. And thank you. This evening's Dharma talk is Traceless awakening. Traceless. What does traceless mean? You can't track it, you can't find it, you can't see, it leaves no tracks. There's no result. Awakening without credentials is another way of saying it. Buddha Dharma without credentials. Traceless. You could say, well, if it's traceless, how would you know that you had attained realization? You won't. You won't know in the conventional sense. You won't be able to find anything else. I'm not kidding you here. And I would really, really appreciate it if you would come after me with questions and put this old man on the spot. If you can. Because if I have anything to gain or lose in this situation, I'm lying to you. Find out. How are you going to know if your teacher knows what he, she, they are talking about? How are you going to know? If there's a trace of awakening anywhere, then it's not complete. It's still in the relative world of, you could say, spiritual materialism. I spent between 30 and 35 years looking for traces of it. Am I getting anywhere? Is this working? Should I keep doing this? I was doing that long after both my teachers had passed. Not too long. It was just about the time Kobun passed that I began to understand what it was this was about. And that understanding is not logical, it's not reasonable, it makes no sense, and you can't sell it on the marketplace, although people try all the time to market everything. We need to do something, otherwise this teaching can't continue, so we have to have some kind of support. But it is traceless. Excuse me. So you could even say that in the conventional understanding, relative understanding of clarity, awakening, enlightenment, anuttara samyak sambodhi, though it needs to be talked about, but there's no proof for it. If there's proof for it, you could say, well, isn't a person more peaceful, less likely to make? Those are side effects. Those are just aspects of the realization that has no status as anything. But if one is realized, you're less likely to make a commotion in the marketplace about any damn thing. You're not concerned with outcomes, but you are concerned with the process that you see people going through to destroy the world, to destroy themselves, to destroy each other, and make things worse for everybody just so they can get some kind of a credential of, I'm in charge. And people will do as I say, or I will kill them. Might as well be saying that. It's without a trace. It's like nothing happened. That's finally understood what His Holiness the 16th Karmapa Rangjung Rigpi Dorje said in 1981 as he was passing away from this existence. Nothing happens. A relative way of pointing at the ultimate. It goes on forever. Why? Because it doesn't start up, therefore can't end. if you begin to realize this, even slightly, you may have to look at it for another 15 or 20 years. This is why Ramana, when he was 18 years old, awoke by dying to this life on his parents' living room floor, apparently. Spent 20 years at Tiruvannamalai and in a cave, as the story goes, to clarify what it was he just saw. And if there's no students, no one comes and asks you what this is, you will not go out necessarily and promote yourself as a teacher and try to market what you do. Unless somebody puts you on TikTok. I don't know, is that marketing? Is Zim here? He's not here. That might go the other direction. People see me dancing on there. You might think, you guy's an idiot. I don't mind, because that might be very close to the truth. So as Dogen says, basic teaching that everyone has heard, drop off body and mind. Doesn't mean get rid of the body. Doesn't mean get rid of the mind. It's just saying look at the mind and look at the body clearly, specifically, and intentionally, and see that they're unreal. This is how you drop them off. There's nothing to be attached to there. The very attachment itself will start to come apart when you actually see what the body is and not covered up with your ideas, your thoughts, your convictions, your conclusions, your opinions, your analysis of what the body is or what the mind is. As Kobun said in the Heart Sutra translation that he did, falling apart, falling apart, falling apart. I might have this a little bit off. He didn't say that. Nothing to do. Everything all at once. And even it's like everything all at once. Are there even things to be all at once? I don't know. I met him. I only had to meet him once. And for him to basically kick my butt. It took me a long time to see what that butt kicking was about 12 years, actually. And even my son, Takudo, who was sitting here, who was a very close student of his, knew how much knew something, maybe not all of it, how much I was going through, because I asked him about it. What does this mean? Kobun won't talk to me. As I recall what Takudo says, I don't know. I'm not sure what that's about. He doesn't. This is, have you seen him do that to someone else? And I don't think he could come up with anything. There's always a story of the time somebody came and had an interview with Kobun. He got up to go to the bathroom, and didn't he go out the bathroom window? Did you hear that story? And the guy got up to look, see where he went, and the bathroom was empty and the window was open. So even if that isn't true, it's pretty funny. And that would be like Cloud Phoenix. He was kind of disappearing. And it seems like his one of his students, very close friend of mine, Shoho, also was kind of disappearing all the time. He also has a Phoenix name. Laughing Phoenix or Smiling Phoenix, I think it is. So if you realize what this is, if you realize it doesn't go anywhere. The materiality is the illusion that we are somebody sitting in a room with a certain length of life to live, and that we can win or lose or live or die. It's just an incredible illusion. Traceless. So that means that as you're meditating, any of you, meditating and looking for some kind of outcome from the meditation, the very looking for something else, the very search creates a loop where you look and can't find. But then even that goes, the not finding is a finding. So you could have just hung out there for a couple of years instead of looking for, oh, that can't be right. Any of you have been meditating for half a dozen, 15, 20 years or whatever, have run into that situation in meditation where you think, your version, not mine, but this is not getting anywhere. I'm not doing any better. I might even be doing worse. No, I would like to offer that you are finally aware of how much difficulty how much dust you've been kicking up in the first place. Finally, after all, looking, observing, you're starting to see the depth of your confusion. This is awakening. Probably isn't through yet, but that's how it happens, to see the confusion. So that confusion, as has been said traditionally, nothing I made up, that confusion, it is co-emergent wisdom. Wisdom and confusion come up together. They're not separate from each other. You can do this. You can see this. It's like not seeing anything. It's like not having any results. It's like everything all at once. And it's like anything that you thought was going on, or you assumed, or you constructed, is falling apart, just coming apart. All of your ideas about who you are, yourself, even the ideas about Buddhism still come apart. But you may continue to function as a Buddhist, because this is a way to point to ultimate truth, which is not something. It has no status as a thing. I'll take some questions if there are some. Go ahead.
Shoto bowing. I understood you to say something around trying to use the meditation to get somewhere, having a spinning quality. And I'm wondering if we're sitting with the intention to just observe, and that searching quality comes up and we just observe that, does it still have that same
Probably. Yeah, you're not going to get any particular success story out of it. There will be no success story. There may be a whole lot of failure going on. And I would say do it anyway. You heard me say this over and over. Just do it anyway. Just return to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, return to the cushion, return to the wall. No matter how frustrating, difficult it may seem. And if you need to, dedicate it to others. If you can't do it for yourself, then do it for others. More?
Shoto bowing. If you're sitting down for a while, might that still show up for you, that looking for something else that the ego does?
It could, yes, it could. You just can't find any singularity. Everything's going to arise. Desire, differentiation between things, and desire about the differentiation, what you want, what you don't want, still comes and goes, but there's no identity anymore. Never was an identity here or anywhere else. But if you realize your true nature and you're around people who have not realized what this is and are still clenching their fists over this and opening their fists over that, or turning away from that, then you meet them where they're at. And when you meet people where they're at, it's very, very contagious. You will actually participate in passion, aggression, and ignorance, because you've received a vow to be with all things. It didn't say be the higher being who is very enlightened, who helps the poor, helpless wretches who are suffering with their confusion. No, you are the confusion. That's how you can help them, because you are. You're not afraid of anything. You're not afraid of any of the 6 realms, and you freely go past in those realms. More?
Shoto bowing. I had a different question.
Fine.
I don't remember how you said it, but you were talking about understanding this or seeing what this is. How is that not knowing?
It is, but you have to say it some way. I'm not going to give you the description right now. You'd give up and go home. I sometimes say it's worse than you think, and it's better than you think. It's better than you think because it's liberation. Complete, total liberation from the chains of your conclusions, convictions, opinions, ideas, judgments, evaluations. You're free. But it's worse in that you're going to have to march right into it. You're going to have to go right into that disturbed area, and you won't care if you ever come out the other end. No more success story. Go ahead.
Short of bowing, is that marching into the disappointment done by just sitting? Bowing.
No, we can't come up with a standard for it. It may show up in different ways. It's unlikely to happen if you stop sitting, because then you get better and better at just ignoring that area and assuming there is somebody who can win or lose. And the only reason you're losing is because somebody stopped you. The only reason you're losing is you didn't quite get it right that one time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes.
Are you bowing? You said something to the effect that we're not concerned with outcomes, but we are with the process. Mm-hmm. How is the process not an outcome?
Because it doesn't end up somewhere. Outcome is the outcome, the fruition of something. So we're not so concerned about the fruition. If you start trying to produce a result, then you're back into some kind of manipulating causes and conditions or relative truth to get something to happen. That's the mundane path. It can be a highfalutin form of it. It can be a very advanced, even advanced form of working with your chemistry set of the mind in such a way that you're doing a little better because of any number of things. There could be chemicals, could be medications, could be ways of working with the body that align with the mind to help balance things out. But that balance is relative. I'm not against yoga. I'm just saying the yoga that I recommend is this Buddhist yoga, which is mind, working with the mind. Work with the body, yes, sit down, hold still. Yoga positions and so on are not, I wouldn't say they're not beside the point. They aren't beside the point. You should do that if you feel like you need to do that. More?
Are you bowing? I guess I was thinking of a more, I guess I would say broad sort of outcome.
Go ahead.
Let me ask it this way. Is process intention bowing?
So you're looking at the process of training the mind, working with the forums, chanting the sutras, listening to the teacher, discussing with the community, looking at a Dharma text like the Lanka or the Heart Sutra, whatever we are working with, the 30 verses of Vasubandhu, and discussing that with Sangha. That's the process of working with that. That's the intention to understand what this is. Even though we something like the 30 verses is so extremely wrapped up in concepts and the structure of thinking process and so on, and but it's something you need to do in order to realize. But the realization is not an event. It's not even an experience, other than you can say that it might be experiential to realize that you don't want anything, you don't need anything. You're not particularly concerned about anything, other than if you received a vow to be with all things, then you'll find yourself doing that. That seems to stick somehow. I don't know how that works. I don't know what the logistics and the mechanics of that is, but if you receive this vow, your personal life is over with. Maybe not right away, because there is no person. It's not that it's over with. It's going to go on the same way. It's just that it will be about others, putting others before yourself more. Other questions?
Question from Robert Switek.
Robert?
What is the status of ultimate truth?
So we have words, ultimate, and we have another word, truth. Then we have the word status. But if I'm to answer it the way I see it, it has no status. There is no. It doesn't even exist. It has no existence. It's just like, to get close to that, I would say, and this is something I often do, I would say, I'm going to say there's a green cucumber, about 4 inches long, very small, pickle style, and has a pink ribbon on it, tied in a bow, of course. Everyone sees that in their imagination, and Robert, you see it in your imagination. So that's in, it's not the intermediate state, but it's close to an area of consciousness that that has no past, no future. 50 years from now, if you're still alive, you can locate that. What you and I, we just created that together. I made the suggestion, you visualize it. It's so extremely simple, but it's overlooked because we're grasping a thing, we're rejecting a thing, we're closing down, opening up. Whereas that creation is just a dream. It's an intentional dream. And it happens in that area of consciousness that when the body-mind collapses and goes back into the elements, that area is not going away because it has not appeared. That cucumber with a pink ribbon around it is both real and unreal at the same time. It's there, but it's not there. We all can see our version of it. I might ask you, is that laying on a table? And some people might say, no, it's just kind of in space. Another person say, yeah, it was laying on my kitchen table at home. Or no, it was in my hand. So as soon as you're told something or suggested something, then the consciousness will come and find whatever form it needs to support that, which might be a brown mahogany table underneath that. And it might be sitting in a saucer. Not things I suggested, but things that your mind just puts in there because of what? Untraceable causes and conditions. Traceless. Looks like they have a source. Perhaps not. So there's no real status, if I were to say it as in a way that I think is probably the most helpful way to understand it. I would say there's no status to the ultimate. Even the word ultimate is extra. It's in front of what it's pointing at. It's like the arrow that's pointing at something. But you can't see what it is because you're all hung up in the pointer, analyzing the pointer and having arguments with people about how long the pointer is and is it actually aimed down or up and why is it pink? Why isn't it orange or blue? Constant chatter around the edges of the teaching. This happens all over the place in not just Buddhism, but any place, philosophy, psychology, physics, disagreements about stuff.
Shadow bowing. You brought up something that reminded me of when you talk about ordinary mind. Why does it look so extraordinary to us looking onto someone who's just ordinary? Bowing.
I'm not following you.
Shadow bowing. Like there's a golden Buddha on the altar here, but it seems like he's representing something that's really ordinary. So what's the...
What do you want to know? Might not be able to help you, but I still don't know what your question is. Must be difficult to be in your mind. Is it? Don't know. What do you want to know? Just don't want to badger you too much, but what do you want to know about that? I heard the question, I think.
I'll think about it.
Okay. Further? Jishin.
Is there any intention behind the dream we all live?
Is there any intention behind the dream we all live? Yeah. The intention is usually to get somewhere, to protect ourselves, to be safe, to be healthy. All of those intentions are there. Get something to eat, all the relative things. But if we begin to see that this is a dream, some of that can change. We can start to emphasize different parts of our life instead of the mundane parts, possibly. Seems to be different with each person, so very situational.
Thank you, Jishin Bowing. Is there an intention behind that big dream, big matrix dream, if I can call it this way, we are all participating in?
I think I follow you, but we can speculate on that. But I don't know how. I think the most important thing to do is sit down in front of the wall and watch the things that your own mind keeps inventing about this and about that, judgments, evaluations, conclusions, going around and around. I'm not saying your question isn't valid, but I really can't give you a good response that will help you get where I think you need to get, and that's to the wall, not speculating on things. That being said, let's speculate some more. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Well,
Another question from Robert. So when we stop looking at the cucumber, does it become truth only?
I don't know. You're way beyond me there, Robert. Don't have the erudition that you have. So I have no idea. I could speculate on it, but we just get lost in what philosophers often get lost in, or any speculation about the nature of consciousness that works with a lot of concepts. It just turns into circles. And so the best thing to do is to see what it is directly, and then you won't know what it is. Actually, you're in the process, if you're on this path, in the process of transcending knowledge, so that you become free from what you know, not a prisoner of your opinions, ideas, judgments, and your knowledge. I see you. Yes.
Bowing. Passion, aggression, and ignorance, is that always applying to something imaginary? Are we always grasping at ideas?
Seems to be. That's the part that makes it difficult. There's some passion of just really wanting some of Pao Shan's. What was that cake you made?
The Danish?
Yeah. Like that's not imaginary. That's a real Danish that he made, and I ate some of it. And there was a passion to get some of that Danish before somebody took it out of my hands and saying, "Remember, you're diabetic." Well, I did remember I was diabetic, but I also wanted the Danish.
It was sugar-free, so good.
Oh boy, they're sugar-free. Very good. So I'm not sure if that's maybe I may be digressing from what it is you're asking about, but it seems like it tends to get in the mind eventually, and then it becomes even more problematic because we're starting to believe our thoughts about everything. Whereas you don't have to believe a Danish to eat it. You just eat the Danish. There's no big philosophy or psychology going on there. But if it's something else that somebody has said or done that triggers something in your consciousness that you're sitting on for the last 28 days, 3 years, 30 years, and it triggers that and causes that area that is shut off in your consciousness. It's called ignorance. Most people in the world, anytime anything difficult happens, rather than actually feel that, taste that, touch that, live that, they will close it off. So one of several different ways. One is the simplest way, if they can manage it, is just to ignore it. I'm not going to think about it. You might even lecture yourself. I'm not thinking about that anymore. I'm done. I'm not going to think about it. I can't do anything about it. So I'm not thinking, and distract yourself into volleyball or doing something, just do something else. Or the other way to distract yourself from what that is to blame someone. You actually abandon the experience of what that is happening by finding somebody that caused it and being upset with them and mad at them. And there might be a lot of passion around that also, that a big story that they shouldn't have done that. Why did they do that? I know how difficult a time I've had. Why are they treating me this way? Just on and on and on, making other people, other events responsible for the emotions that arise in your mind stream. It's your mind, not yours as an ego, but yours as a matrix of consciousness with sense fields and sense of touch, sense of taste, sense of hearing, sense of thinking. Does not add up to a self. The five skandhas: form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness, do not come together and say me. They do, but if you look at it, if you're aware of it, you can see that the body is not a self. The feelings, that's not a self. Thought process does not add up to a self. The sense fields, there might be seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, but the consciousness is not a singularity of somebody going somewhere, having some abilities or lack of abilities. More?
Sounds like about with the example of the Danish or an intense emotion that has like a physical sensation with it. Do we have to abstract, do we kind of abstract or leave that situation in order to reject it or grasp at it?
There might be some kind of shutting down on it, sure. If that's what you're asking. Shutting it out, forgetting it, ignoring it for a while, then it creeps back up. Then we have to change our relationship to it somehow. Find somebody who's causing it, blame them. That's one way. Going to sleep? Yeah. Lean against the wall. Yes.
And you're bowing. Part of the ninth precept of no being angry is bowing to the richness of how things really are,
Yes.
rather than how we want them to be.
Yes.
Is that awakening? Bowing.
No, that's the path. If you're on the path, then you may have to bow to the richness of the way things really are. However it's showing up, no, even if you're angry and upset about something, you could actually make that part of your practice. You might not have to do it out in public, but you might bow, you might acknowledge how rich everything is, including your anger. That whatever is showing up is dependently arisen. There's no person who's angry anywhere. There is no person. But you may need to find that out rather than be convinced of it or something like that. You may need to actually see it yourself. There's no solid being. There are emotions, there are feelings, but they don't have an owner. Consciousness is not owned by anyone, anything, any identity. More.
And you're bowing. So until that realization is manifest, let's say, and we are still tangled up in the stories that seem to arise because someone seems to trigger something, is it helpful then to bring up the five skandhas, or that there's no self in the skandhas? Is that kind of...
In your own mind stream?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Recite go to some aspect of the scriptures, of Buddhist teaching that seems to be, you resonate with that, it seems to help you. There's 59 slokas, and it teaches 7 points of mind training. 59 different slogans. Some of them I'm not saying they're worthless, but they're manipulating your mind. Whereas other slogans seem to be, from my perspective, seem to be pretty helpful. But I think that's why it's set up that way. So there's something in there that anyone can relate to. Sometimes people need some kind of manipulation to deal with what they're dealing with. The whole right or wrong is beside the point. It's what's fundamentally going to help you or anyone else. Some people may need to do sending and receiving or Tonglen practice. I don't teach that, but I would teach it if somebody came and we talked for a while, and I thought that might be the very best thing for them to do is Tonglen. I would teach them how to do that. I just don't teach it as a blanket situation because it opens up the consciousness, which is already very, very spacious and full of all kinds of, shall we say, foreign elements. So I think opening yourself up to that can make things worse. And you could also come back and say, well, isn't that dependent origination? Well, yeah, it is. But, we don't have to necessarily go to a mountaintop or go to a charnel ground. In ancient times, they would go to a charnel ground, a place where death and ghosts and spirits, all that was happening. Meditate there. Let's go to the very worst place. Let's go to hell and meditate there.
One of the four vows says Dharma gates are endless. What is a Dharma gate after seeing what this is?
There may be some Dharma gates, there may not. But a Dharma gate is conventionally is talked about as being some aspect of your own consciousness that is blocking you from seeing the truth. And it could be anything from anger, irritation with a certain person, jealousy, depression, anxiety, something that where you're not able to just function very well in your daily work situation or a social situation, that something is not working. Maybe you could call that a Dharma gate. In other words, instead of medicating it or covering it up, like what quite often the doctors or psychologists or something may want to do that, not all of them, but may want to do something to stop that from happening or get you to get over it. You can actually look at it as a Dharma gate, as something you personally need to look at so that you can understand deeply what that is. Dharma gate. More?
When it says Dharma gates are endless,
Yeah. They keep coming and going and coming until you could say until you realize who you are. Until you realize your true nature, then these Dharma gates will probably continue to show up as something you are going to need to work with. But if you realize what this is, then your whole life is about serving others, helping others who are dealing with their Dharma gates, or at least not meddling with them.
you said until.
I did say until.
Can Dharma gates be seen through in this life?
Sure. Yeah, you can see that what you thought was a problem is actually not a problem. It's only a problem if you attach to it, or if you think it has to be gotten rid of, or you think you have to know why it's happening, or if you think it shouldn't belong there. Any position, take any position at all around anything that's arising creates different forms of warfare.
You know, I guess in some sense, do they end or do they start arising differently?
Let's put it, I think I see what you're asking about, what I'm saying. Let's say it this way, this might be the best approach. You won't care what they do. You see it as an illusion. The whole damn thing is an illusion. This room, this altar, this computer screen, all the people on Zoom are relatively real, but ultimately you begin to see it with your Dharma eye, which is talked about the Shobogenzo, treasury of the true Dharma eye. You begin to see it as it is. So there's no personhood anymore that cares. This doesn't mean that you won't see somebody who is suffering or having difficulty. You would wrap your arms around them and even cry with them over something that had happened to them. And why are you available to do that? Because there's no personhood happening there that has a preference for anything. So when you see someone who's wrapped up in intense suffering over a preference of something they wanted and they lost, and you see how much they're suffering. You've had enough suffering. You know how painful it is to suffer. There isn't a person in here that hasn't had extreme suffering of some kind. Losing someone you love, losing someone you thought you were in a relationship with, and all of a sudden they want to go in another direction. That is not comfortable. And there's no amount of philosophy is going to help you with that. No amount of Buddhist teachings or ideas or quotes of Dogen are going to help you deal with that. Maybe a little bit, not much. You have to see that. You have to see your own attachment to it and see that the attachment is contingent upon something you're attached to, objects, and someone who's attached, subjects, and see that subject-object is unreal. So that's what the path is talking about. More?
What adheres subject and object?
What?
What adheres subject and object?
What keeps them together?
Yeah.
Passion, aggression, ignorance, hope, and fear. And the singularity of believing that you are somebody, a subject, who can win or lose, or has been mistreated. You know, we've talked about it before. It's not that that emotion or that feeling isn't real and doesn't hurt. This is why the Buddha said 2,500 years ago, life is suffering. As I've said this, it's probably endless times. He didn't say part-time. It's suffering, suffering. The nerve endings are everywhere. There's going to be some kind of difficulty. Pain of pain, the pain of alternation, or the pain of the composite. There's a pain of conditioned existence. It's not nihilism, it's just true. That doesn't mean you can't have some cheesecake, or attend a party, or attend a concert, or enjoy yourself. Of course, there's going to be that also. Might be quite a bit of that. If you're not operating out of hope and fear all the time and struggling with your life, you might be able to have some enjoyment in your nerve endings. More?
What happens after attachment? When attachment, when we're not attached to preferences, beliefs, judgments, and ideas, what's left?
Your life. That's one of the, you could say it's one of the side effects of the whole thing. If no longer any struggle with anything, then you could say you're still, not moving around all the time, and you're relatively at peace. No demand, no disappointment in anything, because you can't really lose what is fundamentally valuable. That doesn't mean that if somebody you're really close to couldn't disappear, or it might be incredibly painful for you, or for me, of course.
Being valuing is terror, like when you say what's left is your life, that's kind of terrorizing, and is terror further attachment? Is that
You mean fear of something? Being terrorized by something?
there seems like a difference, but
What do you want to know? Let's do it that way.
is the terror or fear of living your life as it is that further layer of attachment? Is that
An attachment to a self who can be hurt, who's in danger, who's vulnerable. We have to cover it up, make sure we don't do something that will jeopardize our relative safety. Well, there's room for more questions in that area. I don't know how well I can respond to do the best I can. Further? Anyone?
Just to pick up on what Bjorn just said, so the fear of living life as it is that the big disappointment?
I think the big disappointment is that you're not going to get what you thought you were going to get. You're You were not going to get that situation. It was not going to manifest, not going to manifest. It was disappointing. But it's not like an emotional tragedy or something like that. It's just disappointing. Lots of room for questions there.
When you're bowing, it just seems like there's some kind of standard then that we're measuring up to.
Probably
If it's
is.
disappointing, then we have an idea.
So actually, it's not disappointing, but that's a way of talking about it so that you can actually encourage someone to work with the disappointment that comes up in our daily practice, in our life, because it can be disappointing to go along and not make the progress we thought we would be making in the way we thought we would be making it. Instead of becoming more relaxed, more peaceful, more carefree, more whatever. Instead, we feel more agitation, perhaps, feel more difficulty. I have said before, it may get a lot worse before it gets better. That's been my experience over the last number of years.
Question from Adriana.
But,
What is the pain of conditioned existence?
so let me do all three of them, and there's other ways of talking about this, but the pain of pain is obvious: toothache, broken leg, all kinds of painful things, lots of other ones besides those. Just the pain of losing somebody. The pain of alternation means that everything is going fine, but you're so worried and paranoid about change that you know that everything you have can go away any minute. So you're right in the middle of having everything, having success, having a good job, having a supportive partner, a mate, having wonderful children. You're still suffering because you know that those are not protected. There's no guarantee those will be here tomorrow. So you start suffering right in the middle of your luxuriousness. You start to suffer. So that's the pain of alternation. That can go away. And then the third kind is the pain of the composite, or the pain of conditioned existence, which several ways of talking about that. And the way that I'm going to say this now is when you see that you're not really separate from anything else, then everything, you see all the pain in the world. You might be somewhat free of your own comings and goings as far as pain, but you see the pain in everyone. You see the extreme suffering all over. You can't really hide out from that anymore. And also just the very nature of being a living being. We're coming back to that first noble truth. Life is suffering. Not the suffering that you can get rid of necessarily. Who knew? You have a question?
You're bowing. So when you say it could get better, it could get worse, with awakening, does it get worse?
Not with awakening. Awakening is not an event in the conventional sense that you mark a place in time. There are people who talk about it differently than I'm talking about it. I didn't have an event, and I don't claim awakening. But I'm teaching what I'm looking at, and what I'm looking at is has no marks, has no particular qualities to it. Might have offshoots of that to some extent. That I'm not going to fight with anybody anymore. But there's no status happening there or some kind of a proof that something has occurred. I used to be this way, but now I'm awake. Now I see the nature of reality.
Another question from Adriana.
Yeah, go ahead.
How can we work with feeling disappointed?
Be disappointed. Just don't argue. Whatever's showing up, that's what it is, rather than alternate into something else or some kind of way of working with it. Or it's like, you're not going to hear me say just accept it. I might say the opposite. Don't accept anything. Look at it. Whatever shows up has a right to be there. It's dependently arisen. Everything is. So, just disappointment. If you don't do anything with it, it can't last because it gets its trajectory or longevity or its duration from being fiddled with, pushed down, or covered up, or blaming somebody or something for why that's happening. It's just a way of kind of keeping it included and putting you to sleep. No, you're putting yourself to sleep with my help. So what I would say, Adriana, is just receive it best you can. And even that, you can be a failure at that. That's okay. It's the intention to receive, not the success story. All you have to do is intend. You don't have to succeed at anything. If you don't understand, ask questions, or don't ask questions. Go ahead and come up with your own ideas about it, if you wish.
Orca bowing, what is the fear of who we are?
So as long as we're somebody, then we can somehow protect ourselves. As long as we have an idea of who we are, we have a description, we have what our culture tells us, everybody's in agreement that we're all somebody going somewhere. And so the fear is we have a sneaking suspicion that we might not be anybody at all. So we use our body, our feelings, the five skandhas to come together and convince us that we are somebody going somewhere.
What part of that turns us away from the truth?
Fixation on ideas, fixation on the fear, thinking or that we know why we're feeling that way and what we have to do, what we can do, what we can't do. More.
What do we turn to?
What do you mean? Turn to ideas about it. Opinions, ideas, have conversations with people. Talk about our ego with others, talk about our ego with ourselves. Journaling about how we feel and what we're doing, reestablishing our identity over. It's not that journaling isn't a valuable thing for people to do. Writing down your dreams is valuable in terms of awareness. But the best use of your time, as far as I understand it, this is just how it looks to me. You don't have to believe anything I say, but sit down, hold still, spend some time with your mind. Look at the wall. Watch what happens in the mind without accepting, rejecting, shutting down, passion, aggression, and ignorance. Wean yourself away from the tendency to react to whatever happens in the mind by pushing it. React or by explaining it, or react by distracting yourself, moving into something else, daydreaming about something else.
When we distract ourselves, how does that reify our personality?
It's a reference point. Someone who has realized what this is doesn't. There might be reference points, but they don't do anything with them. I can say it very bluntly. They don't care if they're not concerned with death, even though it's this in this situation. This body mind is going back into the elements. There's no way around it. Everyone here, this one probably sooner than anyone else's because I'm so old. But not necessarily. But you're not concerned because you know who you are, who you actually are. Your identity is actually from looking and 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 then looking some more and then looking some more, looking some more. And it wasn't an event, but suddenly there wasn't anybody there. And you realize that you're looking at what you thought was a self, and it is empty of a self. There is no one there. Consciousness, this voice that's happening, your voice is happening, There's no one here behind this one. If I go, who's speaking, I don't see anybody, and I don't mind. But if you know, I can show you where ego's at. All I have to do is insult you. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Yeah. And I can also show you where your ego's at by complimenting you. I can do that with anyone here. And you could do that with me. You could insult me. You're the worst Dharma teacher I've ever heard of. You don't have a kind word for anybody, and you're negative all the time. All you talk about is suffering. I'm going to go study with somebody else. That will not hurt my feelings. No, I might even think probably that's a good idea for you. If I don't make sense, if it doesn't resonate with you, then you're not ready for this. Not because I'm such a fancy teacher. It's just that I'm teaching out of what I'm looking at. I don't have any credentials. I have no proof. But insulting you or complimenting you, that area of consciousness that doesn't really realize it's artificial, starts to get affected just by somebody's words. And I can even be doing it and say, and you know I'm joking, or you know I'm just inventing something. I can show you if you want. Anybody want to volunteer? You want to volunteer?
If you need one.
Huh?
If you need one.
You're too anxious. No, you're too prepared for that, Eric. I'm not going to cross swords with you. You might insult me. Then what do I do? I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying that I could reflect on it. If somebody attacks you, whether they mean it or whether they're joking, it's still, you can feel it. How do I know? I can feel it. That has not gone away. What's different? I'll say it as clearly as I can. Please dwell on this and think about it. The emotion that arises in your mind stream is just as intense without a self as it is with a self. But if you have that emotion arise in your mind stream without a self, then you can see the extent of dependent origination, because you see that everything is dependently arisen. Whereas if it rises with a self, then the subjectivity is so intense that it cannot see the objectivity as not being separate from the subjectivity. Chisho, cheer up. Chisho is going like this. Okay, let's call it an evening. You have a question?
Since
One more.
you're going,
One more. Go ahead.
I was wondering about seeing the objectivity in the subjectivity.
Yes.
How do we do that?
Just you would need to see that your identity, who you think you are, is unreal. Doesn't have, you don't have to get rid of it. Just see that that it's makeshift. It's just made up, and it is propelled by hope and fear. And so, therefore, if I come at you and insult you, you would even know that I don't mean that. But it's still because there are areas in the consciousness that have not been seen because we're able to hide out from them, pretend they don't bother us. Oh, I used to be bothered by that. I just don't care what people think anymore. Ever heard anybody say that? You know, I used to be really concerned about what people thought. Not anymore. I'm my own dude. I'm my own person. Nope. You see it a little bit? This is what we do when we look at the wall. We eventually get to know ourselves pretty well, pretty deeply if you spend, but it seems to take, much as I hesitate to say it, seems to take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of sitting meditation. To even, it certainly has for me. It's taken many, many years, and relationship with 2 teachers and several crazy sanghas, where the people were difficult. You have to make everybody into a teacher. If you don't, you'll just run away from that sangha. We happen to have a fairly good sangha here so far. Don't we? Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Thank you for your attention and for participating in this Dharma talk, and also thank you for all of your support and help in so many different ways.